Welcome into another edition of the Jim Jackson Show. As you see, I got a beautiful view of Manhattan, Gotham, New York City, baby. Here for the Big East Tournament, so it's going to be a lot of fun. But thanks for joining. You can watch this episode on YouTube, Rich Eisen Show, of course, but also at on IG at Jim Jackson Show or whatever you download your favorite podcast. Check us out. Looking forward to it. But like I said, I'm in New York. Great weather, great time. It's always a great time of year when the Big East Tournament. Listen, I'm a Big Ten guy, of course, worked the Big Ten Tournament. I know the ACC Tournament is great, but it's nothing like the Big East Tournament. I mean, nothing like it. In particular, now that UConn is kind of back in the fold, that St. John has rejuvenated itself in its program, and Rick Pitino is back here, is nothing like the Garden and the atmosphere of the Big East Tournament. I mean, it's nothing like it. And when the crowd comes in, they're getting off the subway, the trains, they're walking, they're cheering for the teams, or even if they're just a participant just to watch some great basketball. The atmosphere, the nostalgia, going back to the late 70s, 80s, when all it was the Georgetowns, the St. John's, the Patrick Ewings, the Pearl Washingtons, Chris Mullins, Mark Jacksons, Walter Berry's, these teams. Ronnie Cycli, Derek Coleman, all this stuff. It's just so much history, but it's just all about basketball. I mean, it's a conference for basketball, and I'm just blessed to be a part of it once again. Looking forward to starting to cover the games tomorrow. And then we roll into March Madness, which is why this show is going to be great, because I have my play-by-play partner and my former partner, play-by-play with TNT, Brian Anderson, is going to join us and talk a little bit about his experience with the NCAA tournament, what he's looking forward to. Is there a team to beat? The nostalgia part of it. And we'll also touch in on a little bit of basketball, NBA, because he covers not only the college side of the ball for TNT, but also, of course, is the voice play-by-play with Turner. So it's going to be a great show. Looking forward to it again, and love being in New York City. As promised, a really good friend of mine is taking time out of his busy day, very busy day. You think I got 18 jobs. My good friend, Brian Anderson, who's currently the voice of Milwaukee Brewers, but more importantly, with TNT covering the NBA, but also my partner, play-by-play partner in the upcoming NCAA tournament, March Madness. We actually go back to the Big Ten Network days. So Brian Anderson, among other things, welcome to the show. Thank you for taking the time. And how you doing, my man?
Oh, I'm doing great, man. I can't wait to get this whole thing started with you again. You and I go way back. We've called a lot of great games, a lot of great moments, first in the Big Ten Network and then in the NCAA tournament. So you, like me and the rest of us, our crews, all the announcers, those behind the scenes, we have no idea where we're going, what teams we're getting. Right. It is the craziest mad scramble come Sunday. We'll watch the selection show just like everybody at home. And then hopefully in a timely manner, which is not always the case, we get our assignments. And then that's when the real work begins. So, I can't wait to get this going. Day one is always a challenge. But when you and I are hanging out together with Allie LaForce and our great crew, man, it just it feels right. So this is a special time of year for sure.
It's interesting. The more we do it, because I'm in college all year. You, unfortunately, because of the NBA, cover more of that. And we talked about the challenges for you coming in. What's the biggest obstacle challenges once you learn, where we're going and what teams are in that region? What's the biggest obstacles for you to overcome?
Well, it doesn't change. It's just the, there's 8 teams. That first day, we have 8 teams to cover. And for most of those teams, 99% of the players and coaches and the subjects that we cover and the programs, this is the biggest day of their year. Even if you're a 1 seed, you saddle up for day one of the NCAA tournament, and it becomes the moment of your season. And, for us and for me especially, trying to reacclimate quickly to those teams, those players. I always say it goes against every rule of prep that I've ever known or done, because usually you go a mile deep and an inch wide, and you're digging down to the 13th, 15th man on the roster. Well, that first day, it's got to be a mile wide and an inch deep. You got to make sure you get the names right, you get the season right. We all have a divide and conquer mentality, which is what's great about our particular crew with you and me and Allie. Allie's great on the newsy stuff. You're great on the inside basketball, how they're going to play, their strategies. And then for me, it's all about trying to develop those stories and knowing the players, knowing their rotations. So that's the scary part. I will say I'm very fortunate this year, for the first time in a while since I signed my deal with Turner and TNT, that we did a bunch of college games early in that Players Era tournament.
Right.
So we had the whole week of Thanksgiving week. And next year, after we officially lose the NBA, which is sad on one side, but on the other, we're diving right in. We've signed rights agreements with the Big East, with the Big 12. We're going to continue with that Players Era tournament. So I'm excited about getting back into college basketball the way I was when you and I were working together at Big Ten Network next season.
And that's great too, because even me covering college all year, you're going to end up, that 116 game or whatever it is, and covering some teams that made it through the play-in games or the Final Four. I mean, the playing with the 4 teams coming in, and then 2 versus of 15, and even though I've been covering all year, and you kind of on the outside looking in, you got to do your research and study. You watch conference championships. You trying to get the names right. But the excitement part of, the thing is, we've been doing this for a long time, but as much as college basketball has changed with the NIL and also the transfer portal, teams don't look the same. It hasn't touched yet the environment of March Madness, especially that first weekend. You feel when you walk in and you come through that stadium that first time for the first sets of games, you can just feel that it's still magical in some sense, despite some of the moving parts. Or do you feel it's changing a little bit atmosphere-wise because of so much movement in college basketball?
No, I'm with you, and I think to the contrary. You start to develop these patterns with players who have maybe been to an NCAA tournament with another team, or a player that's punching up now. Like Grant Nelson last year, like a guy we covered at Alabama. So guys who have come from mid-majors or smaller schools, now they're in different universities. And I think it's interesting. Obviously, there's a whole discussion about NIL, and that certainly needs some regulation at some level, but it doesn't affect us, our preparation, the way we look at the games, because the games matter. They matter to their programs. They matter to the teams those players are playing for. That does feel like a regular season conversation. How many of these players will come back next year? Every player is, you'd be crazy not to pursue the portal on some level. Even if you're really happy where you are, you need, you should do your due diligence. But I think at the end of the day, the only time it affects us is when we know a team is out. Let's say they're losing, there's no way to come back, and we start determining, wow, as this guy played in his last game with this university. Yes. And that used to be pretty easy to know, and now you really don't know that, because you don't always know the ins and the outs. But we approach these games the same way, and it hasn't changed at all. I started calling the NCAA tournament in 2011. So for me, it's the same, and it really matters, and it's a big audience, and there's nothing more entertaining, and it is one of the greatest sports days on the calendar across the world, not just in the United States. So, and to have a partner like you, not to shine you up, but Jimmy, you're one of the best college basketball analysts, one of the best basketball analysts going. You do your prep, you come in hardcore. You have all the notes, you have all your prep, you keep all of us in line, and we're thankful that we have a guy like you that is our leader and the guy who kind of runs our crew when we dive into these games. So that's the beauty of it. The gigs are the gigs, but the relationships are really what matters. And we've been lucky to be a part of this for a long time now.
Yeah, we got a great crew. I mean, and people don't realize too, when you have a producer too that understands basketball, it's a lot easier too to be able to get the kind of coverage, the kind of say replays, looks, how we cover the game, because now you're not just trying to rush in elements and sponsorships, but you're really being able to situate the game. And there are different times during the game you need to come back with a replay and highlight something. And having a crew, they said Allie, because she played, being able to ask the right questions, give us some insight coming from either out of a timeout on the sideline, coming out of halftime, that buys into and plays into what we're talking about the narratives of the situation.
It's an analyst dream, and it's our regular NBA crew. So, it's important
which I miss.
That people realize that we dive in. Like everybody on our crew is really excited and eager. Every year we do the tournament. It's something different for us, but we jump in. This is going to be the regular crew that does the NBA regular season, the NBA playoffs, and it's an analyst dream because we can dive in, especially Jimmy can dive into the plays, and we'll break it down. And of course, Allie, we always say, she was a 30-30-30 player.
That's right.
For the Ohio Bobcats. So,
yes, that's right.
I mean, she put up big numbers. She only got in when they were up 30, down 30 in the last 30 seconds of a game.
Yeah.
That's our joke.
But with all these years, is there, and maybe it's not singular, is there a special moment that you go back to by covering the tournament, or there's just moments that kind of just stand out to you after all these years?
There's there are a bunch of moments, and for play-by-play guys like me, it's different than for you guys because those we're all victims to the one shining moment. I mean, we want to hear our voices on those. It's like that's growing up. You would hear that, and you would hear those calls, and that's kind of the dream, And I've had a number of buzzer beaters and dramatic comebacks, and there's probably 3 or 4. One of my favorites, I live in Wisconsin, as you know, I live in Milwaukee, and one of my all-time favorite moments was Bronson Koenig and a team you're very familiar with, that Wisconsin team.
Wisconsin.
I think that was 2016 when Bronson Koenig hit a buzzer beater to send the Badgers to the Sweet 16, and those never get old. I probably had, I don't know, a dozen in my career. But also the thing that really gets me going, or like the victory, we don't have a scoreboard like when you were a player. There's not an ending, but our scoreboard in the broadcast world is when we finish a game or a series, and then maybe we'll see that team the next year or that program, and we'll talk to the SIDs or the head coach or those that are involved, like social media folks, and they say, and this happened a couple of times this year, especially with Alabama when we had them in Vegas. But, you guys are all over our postseason video. And thanks for taking care of our players and our team the right way, whether it's the stories we tell, whether it's the games we cover, the moments we cover, getting it right. We're all trying to get it right. And when you hear that on the back end, maybe years later, I still, to this day, when I run into the folks at Purdue, they still bring up Ryan Klein and his incredible, run in I think that was a Sweet 16 game in Louisville. And to this day, that still happens. And so to be kind of connected to a program that way, it's an ancillary connection, but to be connected and have your voice on those calls and be a part of that and have them give you that feedback, that thank you for covering our team properly. I mean, that is really ultimately what we're striving for. And it's not to say we haven't made our mistakes in the past. We certainly have, but we try to correct those as soon as we can. And we want to represent the players, the coaches, the programs. We want to represent the fan base as best we can. And that's the real scoreboard when we get that feedback at, years later even.
Yeah, it's amazing too when people, like I said, it's the passion part of March Madness is something in particular, how you cover the team and a program, family members that remember us on a call and how we covered it. And they're really appreciative of, highlighting, being critical at times, but critical in the right way, constructive wise, of how we cover them. What's interesting too about March Madness, like NBA playoffs and NBA is about the superstars. Of course, it's the team itself, but stars drive, the narrative a lot. And college is a little bit different. Do you see, a Cooper Flag, unfortunately, got hurt today on the ACC tournament. So hopefully he'll be back up and running and be healthy enough to make a deep run in the NCAA. Because I just think Duke, what I've seen is the best team out there. I've seen them up close. I called the game, and they're a well-balanced team. But does it need to be as star-driven in college, or is the storyline itself with these schools in the one shining moment at one time enough to carry it, or is it a combination?
I think that's the beauty of it, is that we aren't force feeding the stars to you. We don't need to say Luka Doncic, LeBron James, and the Lakers for you to be interested in that, because really whoever emerges is who we can then jump on the tracks with. And that's the thing I love the most. It can be a Ryan Klein, who had the game of his life in a Sweet 16 game. It can be a Grant Nelson. You never know where somebody is going to shine. And when they're big personalities, of course, that's better. And then, we are responsible for the games. But watching what we do and how these players perform as we're chronicling these moments, watching that spin off into something bigger, however that's going to work, whether players end up on the back page of the New York Post or the New York papers, or whether they're in all the highlights or all the confidential things, the locker room confidentials that we do on CBS and TNT. Like, I love that part of it when they emerge as stars. We're there to chronicle it in real time, and then the layers and layers of stories follow up, and then we get to kind of stay with a lot of those teams too. So, for a lot of these guys, and this is what your perspective is always great, because they really value, these players do value what you have to say. And if you don't know, players just flock to Jimmy Jackson. See, I thought when Jimmy got old that they wouldn't know who he was anymore, but obviously they're on the Googler, man, because they know who Jimmy is. And I think, Jimmy brings those NBA eyes too. And you were a star in college. You've kind of lived the life that every college basketball player would want to live. So you have that instant respect, and then they value what you have to say. And, watching you interact with the players in these practices, and we'll sit through 10 hours of practices, the day before our games start. It's always fascinating to me. And Chris Webber was the same way. And when Reggie did it, guys who have had the level of success that you guys have had in the NBA. And the NBA used to be a taboo thing in college basketball, especially March Madness.
It was.
We don't necessarily, we're not trying to say in these great moments that not everything is an evaluation of how this guy's going to be in the NBA. It's not that. It's just, whoa, you're going to see Benedict Mathurin in the NBA. And that's all that needs to be said. When we had him in San Antonio playing for Arizona, I mean, there are a number of players like that come through. We're not comparing them, and we're not constantly doing evaluations of players what is their biggest game and biggest moments. It's not that. It's just like we can easily, and you, Jimmy, can easily say this guy's got a chance. This guy is going to be at the next level. And that also helps you know, like, there's bigger things maybe ahead of Cooper Flag. But for somebody that may not have NBA hopes, I mean, your son, he wanted to play in the NBA, but those NCAA tournaments are the pinnacle of his playing career. And that's an amazing thing to say, that you competed and won in an NCAA tournament. And I think that's important for us to recognize too. And that's the thing that you really bring to our squad is your scouting ability, who's going next level.
It's great about that too. And this year, because you've covered the game, I think it's not really a dominant team, a favorite team. You had the SEC who dominated all year with regards to Auburn and Tennessee, and Alabama was up there. Florida was those teams are in the top 5, top 10 all year. Duke kind of standing out. It's different this year. No, really, North Carolina, Kansas, UConn has been down this year, Villanova. So is this, in your opinion, and I'm going to go into some NBA stuff too, but to close out kind of our March Madness question, is there a favorite in mind that you think going into the tournament that people are looking at and saying, okay, this is the team that everybody needs to beat?
Yeah, well, I mean, of course, it's going to be a Marquette University of Wisconsin championship game. I think everybody
is that it?
Feels that way.
How much Shaka pay you for that?
Shaka and Greg Gard. I mean, come on, now I think Duke and Auburn.
I'm gonna tell you something. I'm gonna tell you something. Wisconsin, the way they play now is a lot different. Sneaky. They shoot the ball.
Tanje's a real deal, man. Now those are two teams I watch a lot.
Right. I mean, this is not the swing offense, slow it down, 65 points a game, Wisconsin. But go ahead, finish.
No, they go fast. I do. I'm kind of kidding, but it wouldn't surprise me. But what I like about those programs and what I think is important, and we see it a lot, is the continuity teams. Like I think Alabama is a sneaky NCAA tournament team. Not that, I mean, people aren't surprised if they go to the Final Four, but I think Alabama is one of those teams that could win it all because they have pieces that have done it. And when you have pieces and you know each other, obviously Auburn and Duke are from what I've seen, and this is from afar and just as an observer, they look like the two best teams. But I saw Oregon. They can match up with anybody. Bama can match up. I actually really like Marquette and Wisconsin. Michigan State is a beast. The Tom Izzo factor is real. So, those would be like the group of teams that I would certainly have my eyes on. But, you get some of these teams in these big conferences and they play these tough schedules. They're kind of ready for it in the NCAA tournament, especially if they have players that are returning and have a little bit of continuity, because that's when the tension comes. So I'm always leery of teams that are heavy reliant on the 3-point shot, because in the NCAA tournament, it is tough to win 4, 5, 6 games and rely on your 3-point shooting. So those are the teams that are a little scary to me. But I like Clemson too. I mean, we had Clemson last year. Clemson, one of the 3 teams to beat Duke this year. They've got guys that kind of fit. They fit, and they haven't had the kind of year that maybe they thought or they hoped, but they've been good, and they had that run last year. A lot of those players are back. So anyway, who knows? That's the beauty of the tournament. It's a one-shot deal. It's one and done. You get a hot team, you could let it ride, and I love that it's not swayed so heavily because it is just one game. Anybody can beat anybody. And that's the beauty of our broadcast and our production, is that we're ready for all of that whenever that happens.
It is funny too, because we're so used to having an antagonist, a team, a Duke, a Carolina, a UNLV back in the day that people love to hate or wanted to see win. And over the past few years, because there's a lot of parity with regards to teams, you really haven't had the UConn, of course, when they made their run, because they returned everybody in the circle. UConn, Villanova, when they had their run, because those guys were together. But, this year it's kind of open, so to speak. And you're kind of waiting to see who emerges from these conference tournaments. And more than anything else, is once the brackets are announced, it's all about matchups. Who's in that region? And that's very important too, because like you said, style-wise, like a Michigan State who hasn't relied on a 3-point line. When you go into deeper Sweet 16, Elite 8, you're playing in these domes, whatever it is, and it feels cavernous. They're not relying on shooting the ball. They're not relying on if the 3 ball is going in, does that make or break us as a team? So that in Houston, St. John's is a team that reminds me a lot of the 22-23 Houston Cougars team that didn't shoot the ball well from 3, didn't shoot the ball well from the free throw line, but defended their butts off, limited teams' points, got out in transition, and they were heavy in second shots. So a St. John's comes in at a 5 or 6 seed, and they get into the right region, you see them playing in the Sweet 16 Elite Eight, you're like, uh-oh, is this the Houston team all over again? You know what I mean? So that's the beauty for me for this year, is the excitement of the unknown and watching kind of stars emerge right in front of our eyes during the tournament. And that could be coaches and also players. We've seen it on both sides.
Coaches have a huge impact,
Yes.
way more than almost any other sport. And to see Rick Pitino, like this is going to be, talk about like, I mean,
right?
We just talked about not promoting the stars, but no, he is the guy that everybody wants to get their eyes on. Dan Hurley, I mean, UConn back-to-back champs, and Houston. Like I always tell my degenerate gambler friends, go, if you're trying to get deep, go search the teams that have the best perimeter defenders. Typically, those teams will make a run because it's so guard oriented, especially the NCAA tournament when the pressure and every possession matters and the intensity of it. That's why Baylor had such a great run those years, because they had dogs on the perimeter. And like Davion Mitchell, to this day, I can still remember he's totally changing games the way he played defense. And so like if you want one specific thing to go look for, it's usually the teams that have the best perimeter defenders. They end up making a run. You think about some of those Arkansas teams of a few years ago, Alabama, like these guys, man, and especially if they have size that can guard the perimeter and force turnovers and easy baskets. That's the one counter to the teams that rely heavily on a three. If they have perimeter defenders that can get you easy buckets, then that can kind of swing things, because it's such a momentum game. When you start getting turnovers and dunks, which is what great perimeter defenders end up forcing, turnovers and dunks turn into huge rallies. And then that spins off into like why coaches are so important, why Tom Izzo and Rick Pitino, they can feel those moments. They can try to stop those moments. To me, getting into the weeds of like what makes a team successful, almost always it's a team that is going to defend. And when you get to the NCAA tournament, knowing this could be the end of the line for you, that effort level goes through the charts. It goes through the roof there. So that's why guys who are running that way always tend to get our attention when we're prepping for games with teams who could make a serious run, and there are plenty of those teams out there.
Yeah, it is. That's why I love St. John's. They don't shoot it well, but they're big across the board. And they guard and they defend. They kind of like Duke. Duke is balanced enough, but they're 6'5" and up. Anybody they sub is 6'5" and up. They're big, they're strong, they can guard in space, their bigs can guard. And that's what is intriguing about those two teams who are on different spectrums, because one is a better offensive team, but yet has size. The other one is a better defensive team, but they both have size in the backcourt, and they can defend and they can turn you over and convert those into points. So I'm going to tell you what, man, I'm looking forward to it. I can't wait. I can't wait to Sunday to, one, see how it turns out. And finally, we may have to put a dollar bet down to see if we find out where we're going Sunday night, or is it Monday?
Yeah. Well, what we know for sure is our producer, Tom Heights, wherever he says we're going, we won't go there, because he's never gotten it right. Ever.
He's never gotten it right. He's never
ever
after all these years. But let me transition.
I can't wait.
Yeah, I can't wait. Let me transition real quick, because I know you got to go. You got a game tonight. You're in Milwaukee. And I wanted to touch on the NBA real quick. Eastern Conference, I'm not going to say it's locked because we don't know what's going to happen. But it pretty much seems like it's going to be Cleveland and Boston. Milwaukee may make something, because you're right there. It depends on where they finish, the season. They could be a threat, of course. We know that. But in the West, even though it as dominant as OKC has been, is there still, because Golden State is kind of retooled, the Lakers have retooled, Denver is looking better, not shooting the ball as well, but they are looking better. Is it still up for grabs, even though OKC has been dominant in the West, in your view?
Yeah, great question. I think the criticism or the questions about OKC are legitimate and fair, because that was a surprising exit to the Mavericks last year. I mean, Luka was on one. But what OKC is doing, like I am going to go ahead and my eyes tell me across the board, and they're better than they were last year. You know, they've got Chet back,
more
and
mature.
he's healthy now, and Hartenstein is a beast. So I still think Oklahoma City and Boston are the teams to beat. Cleveland is certainly in that category, and having won 15 straight as we talk right now, they've earned that. So they've been the Oklahoma City of the East. I have major concerns about the Lakers, and I know they've had this little honeymoon period, and I've covered a lot of their games since the trade, and they look great when all their pieces are back. But you know, LeBron, there's a lot of them, and you know, Luka he's been hurt a lot, and right now he's got back issues, he's got ankle issues. Obviously, the calf has been he's had 4 rounds of that the last couple of years. That concerns me. They're missing Hachimura. I just think Dorian Finney-Smith is back tonight, but he's been in and out. Like, they're a little older, and that could unravel quick. I hope it doesn't, because I want to see them in all their glory, because I do think the Lakers have a chance to win a title this year. You know, and they could challenge any team, including Oklahoma City. But so that is a concern. But for me, Denver and OKC are the 2 teams, and Denver because they've got Jokic, and I don't care what else is around them. They've been there. They've won a championship a couple of years ago, and Jokic he's never been better. Like, he really hasn't played better than he's playing right now. So I'm never going to rule them out. And then, like you said, in the East, Milwaukee could be a sleeper, just because obviously they got to get there healthy. They're going to get Bobby Portis back with 4 games left. He's in the middle of a 25-game suspension. I actually really like Indiana. I think Indiana, they're well coached. They have
but you like them
roster.
you like them to get to maybe the second round, or to get to a
second
conference
round,
finals?
or wouldn't surprise me if they snatched up a conference finals.
Is that right?
I think they've got something to them that I really like, and I saw it last year. Maybe it's just recency bias, because I covered a lot of those games, a lot of those series. But you know, who knows if Milwaukee doesn't lose Giannis, and then Dame was somewhat compromised last year. Indiana may not even get out of that round, but I like what they do, and they shoot it really well. And so, but no, for me, the team that's going to represent the East, if I got to, lay a bet down, it's going to be Boston until proven otherwise. No disrespect to Cleveland, because I think they match up with anybody. You know, I like those. Those are the 2 teams that are the class of the East. Anybody else who comes through it would probably mean there's injury or something happened to those other teams. But I just
but speaking of that,
I don't see my beating Boston.
But speaking of that, the concern with Kristaps Porzingis and his health, the viral issue that he's dealing with right now, because you're getting the best medical attention. Again, they're not going to disclose everything and what's going on. Yeah, but his health, whether that's an injury or what's going on now, is very important to their overall repeat. Does that concern you with Porzingis?
Oh yeah, no, for sure. But I think they're way better with Porzingis, no question. But he missed a lot of the playoffs last year, even though he tried to come back, and he did have some games played. He was ineffective last year. I think they know how to play with Porzingis. Boston's the one team that can withstand, a top 3 losing a top 3 player. And they just have so much, and I think Boston, I'm not saying they're bored with the regular season at all, but they know what they are. And I think a lot of teams don't know that. And Oklahoma City, they know who they are now. They don't know what they're going to be in the playoffs until proven otherwise. So again, the criticism and the concern is fair, and they could flip that whole narrative this year because they're that good. But until we see it, it is what it is, and until I see it, I'm sticking with Boston and Oklahoma City for now. I mean, that is the chalk prediction to go to the finals. But those 2 teams are just so good. and the big story. But who knows, man? I can't wait. They play series. You know, you get into these 7-game series, injuries totally change what's going to happen. Not only affect the way the season goes, affect coaching changes. I mean, think about Mike Budenholzer with the Bucks just a couple of years ago. Giannis gets hurt, they lose in the first round to Miami, who ends up going to the finals, and all of a sudden they're not good enough. And that, you know, I think a lot of teams hit the panic button too quickly. But man, those wheels start getting in motion here, and it can all change on a dime. And I didn't see Dallas making it to the finals last year. That was not on my list. I just didn't think they had enough around Kyrie and Luka, but they did. And so that can certainly happen.
Well, let me ask you this too, before we get out of here. The MVP race is very tight right now between Jokic, of course, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Zay has been consistent all year. I know Jokic started out in Denver a little bit slower, but you know what he's doing, the numbers he's putting up has been phenomenal. Could this be a year that is so close that they could be co-MVPs?
Yeah, they could, and I would throw Giannis in that too. If Giannis has the kind of finish, I don't know about his games, and you know I'm guessing he won't have enough if they sit him a little bit, but he's put up great numbers as well. But no, I think SGA and Jokic are the two favorites, and if both are deserving, there's no question about that. What I would say is if Jokic doesn't win the MVP, and I'm assuming this is now with an assumption that they finish as they're playing now, like the numbers are kind of the same for the final month, it will be a lot of voter fatigue on Jokic because he's actually having his best year.
Yeah, statistically.
and he's already got MVPs. Yeah. And so, and again, like I love Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, but statistically, I got a hard time reconciling that with Jokic, who across the board, I mean, if you want to go on an analytics piece, you go there. SGA deserves it, though. And if he was named MVP, I don't have an MVP vote, Jimmy. I don't know if you do, but I don't have one. Either. But I wouldn't shame any voter who had SGA over Jokic. I just personally believe that Jokic is, you know, however you define most valuable player, but he is the most valuable player. But your era, you know, that happened all the time with Michael Jordan.
Big time. Karl Malone,
like he could have had a run of MVPs for forever. I mean, Shaq and Kobe too. Like, it's totally fine, and they both deserve it. And a co-MVP, I don't know if I like that, but
I know.
Yeah,
I know. But
mean,
it's so close.
Some arguments.
I think it's Shai just because from beginning to end, this momentum came with Jokic kind of a little bit later.
Yeah.
OKC has been the best team. And again, winning has a lot to do with it, but not all. But SGA has been consistent the whole year. It hasn't been an up and down. And I think that from an MVP perspective and him being able to keep his team above and beyond the best team, consistent. Again, he has help, and his roster makeup is a lot different than Denver's. Okay. But the consistency in what I've seen with him all year. Now, and both too, you know, a lot of times his minutes, I know he's 30 plus something minutes, but a lot of times he's putting up these numbers like Jokic when minutes are less. Because
they're blowing it. They're blowing everybody out,
and he's still putting up these numbers in a compressed period of time, and that says a lot, man. You know, and I'm like you, Brian. If Jokic was to get it, I wouldn't be mad. If I had to vote, I would vote for SGA this year, just because this is a different year for him. But in any other year, it would have been Jokic. I mean, it's
I think this back and forth we're having is exactly what MVP voters will have to reconcile. And I do think that that's exactly the argument. So yes, Oklahoma City, their margin of victory is crazy. Like SGA is putting up numbers basically in a little over 3 quarters because they don't need him in the fourth. You take SGA away from Oklahoma City, you take Jokic away from Denver. That's a no-brainer. The flip side of that argument, though, is is that Jokic has to score and rebound, and he does.
Yeah.
And because he doesn't have as many weapons around him. So, like, if you put SGA on the Nugget, if you just traded those two straight up, they would still put up massive numbers. So, it is going to be a total preference of what you think as a voter, what you think is most important. And that's why a little voter fatigue can come into this picture.
Yes.
And it always has, and it does in every sport. Doesn't mean that both of these guys don't deserve it and they're having MVP seasons. And I would say Giannis is having that kind of year. Jason Tatum's having a great year. And that's why they have first team all NBA because there's something for it if they get to enough games, 65 games. So man, I mean, I think we've just symbolized exactly the tussle that voters are going to have when they do that. And then you got to just vote with your conscience. And, down the road, whoever doesn't win it, it'll be, hey, he should have won the MVP that year. And people will fight to the death on who they believe should have won it. So, and that's kind of what makes it all fun anyway. So we're all for that too, those arguments.
Yeah, it is, man. Hey, listen, man, I know you got a game tonight. Who you got? Milwaukee has, who
Lakers
you got tonight? Oh, that's right.
Bucks,
okay,
Lakers,
so Bucks, Lakers. So that should be a good one, man. Listen, have a great call. Enjoy it. I look forward to next week. It's going to be a lot of fun. And I remember this too, because it's special. We would roll from the NCAA tournament into the first and second round of the playoffs. So that used to be short. So I do miss, covering the NBA with you. So, I watch you from afar and I always shoot you a text during the game. But I'm so looking forward to our time and excitement. And the best part is the unknown of what's going to take place during these games. And the beauty of it is too, Brian, is we get a chance to intimately get to know coaches, players before and watch their interactions. So, you have a great call tonight. We'll be talking on Sunday, and look forward to catching up, my man. Thank you for taking the time to come on.
Nobody I'd rather spend 12 hours with in a day than you on Thursday or Friday when we get to start. Always great to be with you, Jim. I can't wait to see you next week.
I've been trying to get you to have a cigar, but you you keep running from that. I got to protect the voice. I know. That's when you run from me. When I bring up the cigar, you're like, no, I'm good.
It does remind me when we play, we play golf every now and then, and Jimmy smokes cigars, and I get drunk off his cigar, and then I can't see the ball because we sit next to each other in the cart.
That's my go-to right there. All right, my man. I appreciate it. Go do your thing, brother.
All right, bud.
All right. Thanks a lot. And great times with Brian Anderson, man. I mean, you talking about ultimate pro and kind of where he started from in San Antonio, carrying his own camera and kind of working his way through the system. And now what he's doing. Again, we work together at Big Ten Network. So to watch his rise and what he's doing has been great. But thanks again for joining us. He was great. Looking forward to some great games at Madison Square Garden and roll it into, of course, NCAA tournament. Thanks again. Have a good one. Enjoy conference championship weekend. It's going to be phenomenal.